This guy made one of the biggest mistakes that you can make when licensing your songs, and he emailed us about it. And it all comes down to Googling best music libraries. Now, today, we're going to dissect his email. We're going to pull it apart section by section, reveal those frustrations and the mistakes that he made so that you do not make the same mistakes yourself. My name is Michael Elsner, and today I'm joined by music supervisor and sync agent Jody Friedman. And together, we've landed over 10,000 placements of our own songs on TV shows, films, commercials, and video games. And Jody, as you know, we receive emails like this on a regular basis from musicians who've not gone through our program or they've really not taken any sync training in general. And they're frustrated that they're not landing the types of placements that they want to be landing or generating the kind of income that they want to make through sync licensing. And they're really just doing it on the periphery because they don't have a deep level of knowledge and understanding of how the sync industry works.
Yeah. So what happened? He Googled best music libraries. Is that what it was? You want to throw the email up? I'd love to see the email. Can we put it up?
Yeah. Actually, let me read this to you section by section, and I'd love to get your feedback on the various struggles that he's presenting to us. So he starts this email with, "It's taken me several years to get 250 tracks into music libraries. The best return I've had from them was about $2,500 last year, but this year is not looking so good. I've never had any sync fees, but I've had small amounts as my share of blanket license fees. I'm not exactly crushing it." So let's stop there. And Jody, what are your thoughts on this so far?
Yeah, it goes back to not all libraries are created equal. There's exclusive libraries, there's non-exclusive libraries, there's royalty-free libraries, which is probably what he's talking about. This is something we cover, we cover in depth inside of our contract module in Sync Placement Academy. You're not going to get license fees when you're with a library that does only pay blanket licenses. And some of these companies' models are to build up their catalog from producers like yourself who crank out tracks, and they build it up and build it up and build it up, and then they do blanket licenses with big companies, and they say, or small production companies, and they say, you're going to pay us $1,000 a year, you're going to pay us $10,000 a year, you're going to pay us $50,000 a year. Those are blanket fees that they keep. A lot of these companies, and you'll find that wording in their contract or their terms and conditions when you sign up on their website. They may not be sharing blanket license fees with you. Now, for him, it says, I have had small amounts of my share as blanket license fees. So that's what he's talking about for the $2,500. For $2,500 in his share from blanket license fees, it's not horrible if that's a royalty-free library, because blanket license fees are usually very low, but what he's missing out on are those upfront fees, those checks that we showed. Those are upfront license fees. And of course, he's missing out on, those are one-time payments. Those are not royalties that are going to continue to come year after year. And $2,500 in 1 year is not enough to live off of. And in his words, he's not crushing it. So,
correct. So Jody, I did a bunch of back and forth emails with him, and it was really quite interesting because he started the whole email thread to us with, "I already know everything that you teach." And then he continued on with the email that I've been reading to you. And that grabbed my attention, right? Because if you know everything that we teach and you're struggling, I generally want to know why. I want to figure out what the issue is. And so over the course of 2 emails back and forth, we discovered that he's actually with a non-exclusive music library. It's a particular library that you're very familiar with. It generally shows up within the top 5. Anytime you Google best music libraries, it's in that top 5 list. And the deal that they have is that they pay out only 30% of the upfront licensing fees to the writer, which is typically lower than most. So that's the first red flag. But the other element that goes even deeper into this is that their entire business model is based around blanket licenses. And a blanket license, if you're not fully aware of what that means that you as the writer really are going to make substantially less income than a company that specifically focuses on sync licenses, like actual upfront sync fees. Now, additionally, as we dove into this, we discovered that he was under the impression that he was with an exclusive library. Okay, but in fact, this was a non-exclusive deal. And that means that you're, by nature of signing with a non-exclusive company, especially in today's age of the business, this is being filmed in 2024, you are not going to be in the running for the elite placements that Jody and I often talk about, simply because most major production companies are no longer working with non-exclusive libraries. So this is a bit of an unfortunate situation that this individual finds himself in. However, over the course of those emails, I to be honest, I lost my sympathy for him because he was very uncoachable. There's a big element too with licensing where if you really want to crush it with licensing, you have to be coachable. You have to come in and recognize that there are probably things that you don't know. You're walking into a new industry and there are things that you need to learn. And his approach was the complete opposite of that. And of course, he stated this in the very first sentence of his email to us, which was, "I know everything you teach." Ironically, he was doing the complete opposite of what we teach. Specifically, he was doing the exact route that Jody and I emphatically steer our members and our students away from. So let's continue on with the next section. And he says, "This does not square with what I see in your checks and your statements." And what he's referring to here is he attended a masterclass that we had hosted recently. And on that masterclass, Jody and I were both sharing various upfront licensing fees that we've received. And Jody was even holding up checks to the camera. I think you started at like 5,000, and they were 10,000, there was like 12,000 and 17,000. There was even a $30,000 plus check that Jody was showing everyone that he's received from his upfront licensing fees. So this individual continues, he says, "It's hard to be entirely convinced that we are all capable of achieving the same thing, and the only difference is the knowledge gap. Logically, it must be more than that." Jody, your thoughts?
Logically, I would say that knowledge is everything.
Yes.
You don't know what you don't know. And this individual clearly made some mistakes because of a lack of knowledge and education, which only comes from either experiencing it or learning and being taught from people who have gone through it and have experienced it. So, they won't square with what they see with our checks because what we teach is a much more in-depth process of licensing. And we talk about finding your ideal client. Not any client is going to take you on. And this individual just didn't do that because they didn't know any better. They didn't have the knowledge. So
Yeah.
I gotta just challenge that. He says logically it must be more than that. He's wrong. It's not. It's knowledge. Knowledge is everything, and knowledge comes through experience.
Yeah. That's a fantastic perspective. Now, he continues in this email, "In my humble opinion, a huge factor is putting music into the right libraries, some of which are impossible to get into if you are not the absolute best composer or producer." Now, this, in my experience, is entirely a mindset and it's an attitude. It's an assumption that people tell themselves that's not based on reality at all. But Jody, as a library owner, I would love to get your perspective of this.
Well, yeah, having music in the right library is incredibly important. And the right library for this person is going to be different than for you or for me or for her and him and her. Everybody's music is going to fill a different need that a particular library has. Not only that, but that relationship dynamic has to work between those two individuals because it's a partnership. If you want to make a living at this, then you have to produce music that's worthy of making a living at it. And it sounds like this person was at our masterclass, and there were three things and three reasons we spoke about why people tend to not do well licensing their music. And he hit on a couple of them here, which could be the issue for him. Poor quality songs, poor quality recordings. Those are the two big ones. Those aren't small things. We always talk about that, and people say, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." But having the ability to self-diagnose whether your songs are poor or your recordings are poor or they're just not up to snuff, that is key to getting into any good placement with a library, to getting any placement with a library. So, or a good library. Companies like this, non-exclusive companies that built up catalogs, they kind of took on anything. So that could be the issue. It could be that this person's music or recordings just aren't up to snuff. And the other reason would be that they're not applying the sync placement formula that we teach. So if one of these is off, the songs suck, the recordings suck, you don't apply the sync placement formula, then you're not going to get to the result. The three of those things have to be lined up: good songs, good production, and full application and implementation of our formula for you to get the results that we're getting.
Yeah. Well, he wraps up the entire email by saying, "It feels like my music must not be good enough for the better libraries, and the ones that I can get into do not produce the big bucks results that I see you guys getting." Well, this is actually an interesting statement because I actually wonder if he's tried to get into other libraries. My assumption through our conversation is that he hasn't. It seems like he only has experience with this one particular library, and frankly, this particular company is an absolute garbage company. Here's why. If my neighbor's next door kid, who's 14 years old, can get together with his buddies, record themselves farting, throw that into GarageBand, throw some loops around it, call it a song, and then upload it to that particular music library's website and have it in their catalog, that is a company that any reputable musician truly trying to carve out a career licensing their music should have no part of. For the simple fact that there's no gatekeepers to the music, there's really no quality control to the music. Okay, so this particular company will never give him the results that he's looking for, simply because this route is the complete opposite route of what we teach. This is the old way. This really is the old way that was popular back in 2007, 2008. In 2024, it does not exist anymore. It is not a route to carve out an actual career landing placements and actually landing high quality placements. But Jody, of course, I would love to get your response to this section.
That's a really tough one because it's hard to know. I mean, it could be that he hasn't pitched to the right representative. Again, it could be that the music, he's right, that the music's not good enough. And I mean, if that's reason to give up, that's a personal choice to say, yeah, my music's not good enough and I give up means I'm not willing to put in the work that's necessary. So, which we, of course, don't encourage because you have to be determined and you have to be committed to succeeding in making your records as good as they can be. Now, I'll add to what we were saying before. They don't have to be hit records. They don't have to be radio ready. They don't have to be hit songs. They can be instrumentals. You know, some solo piano stuff gets placed. Classical music gets placed. Latin, jazz, pop, world. It doesn't have to be complex. So I think people often overthink it. It just has to be quality and sound, what we call broadcast quality, not like it's recorded in your garage. Shouldn't be pops and clips on your records, right? Some people overlook those basic things. They think they don't see it because they're so focused on the song. But you know, it could be the deliverables. It could be that he didn't have the right metadata. It wasn't thorough. It wasn't complete. You know, there's a lot of variables to take into account, more than just the music not being good enough. If the music is good enough, it could be one of those things. I would challenge this individual to take an honest listen to their records and A/B them, compare the quality against what you hear on TV shows. If you're not listening to what you're hearing on TV shows, start listening to TV and then really listen and then go back and listen to your records and compare them side by side. We all have streaming now. We all have the ability to play and pause things, rewind. It's all on demand. So if your music stands up in the quality, then the issue is not the music. It's that you're not applying the full sync placement formula that we teach.
So there you have it. Googling best music libraries will not always work to your benefit. As you're seeing, the best music library for you most likely will not show up on that search. A lot of times those searches are based off of SEO and marketing elements as opposed to who their clientele is and who the best fit for your music is. Now, it's important when you are looking for a library or a rep to connect with one who's not only excited to work with you and your music and represent your songs to their clients, but even more importantly, they have the right clientele for your music. So, Jody, it's always fun to talk to you and, go through these little processes of dissecting the various frustrations that musicians have and, figuring out where the mistakes were made. And of course, setting people on the right path so that they can consistently, successfully license their songs. And for those of you watching, remember that licensing your music to TV shows, films, commercials, video games, video game trailers, and film trailers and whatnot, it requires a very specific process and a very specific set of deliverables. So we hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we will talk to you soon. If you're interested in getting your songs into your favorite films, TV shows, commercials, trailers, and video games, you're going to want to check out the free guide below.